Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 24th of November of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. During the previous days, the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainian politicals and the European politicals were talking a lot. They were talking about the peaceful settlement of the conflict, they were talking about 28-point plan of Trump, they were talking about changes they want to see in this plan. And today on Monday, on the 24th of November of 2025, somewhere at 11 a.m. of the Ukrainian time, they stopped talking because most likely they told us everything they wanted. And then we might see a small but very powerful, let's say, media gap. So some silence or something like this. And the Russians and the Americans decided to use this pause to give their own opinion regarding the changes that Europeans and Ukrainians are trying to probably make on the original Trump's plan. Putin stated that Trump's proposed peace plan could form the basis of a final peaceful peace settlement. The president noted that these proposals in the version we have seen are in line with the discussions at the Russian-American summit in Alaska, and in principle could form the basis of a final peace settlement, the Kremlin said in a statement. Ukraine, meanwhile, continues negotiations with the United States to amend this plan. Europe, meanwhile, has presented its own alternative. And a very important thing that Moscow has previously made it clear that it will not accept European and Ukrainian amendments to Trump's plan. So this is a very interesting piece of news, and the question is what exactly Zelensky is going to do on the 27th of November. Whether he is going to accept the original plan of Trump or he will insist on the, let's say, updated plan that was updated during the Geneva summit. Anyway, let's wait and see. But today we got a very interesting statement made by Ukrainian authorities. So this is Stefanchuk. He is a speaker of the Ukrainian parliament, and he made a very interesting statement during the previous day, and I would like to remind you and to point your attention that this is the only person that Russia recognized as a legal power in Ukraine. Not Zelensky, but him. And today he stated that Ukraine has red lines in the negotiations. These are the legal recognition of the new territories as Russian, limitations on the Ukrainian army, and restrictions on Ukraine's future alliances. So basically, the only, let's say, the only official, the only legal person in Ukraine who represents the Ukraine itself as a state, the Ukrainian authorities, today rejected the 28-point Trump's plan, and he made this officially. So I'm not even sure whether we need to wait for the 27th of November or not, because today we got the answer. Anyway, let's wait and see, of course. And during the previous day, the President of the United States of America also made a very interesting statement. It is really possible that big progress is being made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening. God bless America. So Trump is trying to tell us that maybe the conflict will not be resolved within the next weeks or something like this, but something good might happen. Maybe we're gonna see, I don't know, Christmas ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe we're gonna see some progress. Very difficult to say, but I believe that in coming days we will understand everything. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions significantly. So we have already discussed the situation on the western Zaporozhye flank, where the Russians managed to outflank the Stepnogorsk citadel from the west and from the east. We have already discussed the situation that Russians most likely managed to answer the settlement of Novodanilovka, but we still haven't received anything whether the Russians managed to dig in deeper, but we believe that in coming days the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will give us additional details. And today we will focus on the city of Huliaipole, because during the previous 24 hours we received lots of very interesting updates. So right now the configuration that you can see right now in front of your screens is the configuration by the end of the 24th of November of 2025. And this is the situation by the end of the 23rd of November. The Russians, according to different sources, have just finished the battle for Zelyony Gai and entered the western part of Chernovone, and nobody expected that the Russians would be able by the end of the 24th of November to secure the settlement of Zatishya. That was obviously unexpected. No, it was expected, but I expected that Russians would secure the village of Zatishya after the battles for the settlements of Chervona and Zelený Gai. But Russians did this earlier. And this information today was confirmed by the Minister of Defense. They stated that as a result of active offensive actions, units of the Group of Forces East managed to establish complete control over the settlement, and a pro-Russian source published this video where we can see the territories that were changed. So obviously, and another important thing, that the changes are very interesting. So as you can see, according to these changes, the Russians attacked the settlement of Zatishya from the north, and Russians attacked the area of the village from the east. And according to this configuration, we see that Russians managed to encircle a huge group of Ukrainians somewhere to the northeast of the Zatishya. So if we return back to the map, Russians attacked the settlement from the north and captured positions, and Russians attacked the settlement from the east. And somewhere here in this and between these fields, a very big group of the armored forces of Ukrainian forces was encircled by Russians. And most likely in coming days, the Russians would be focused to secure this territory as well. Most likely Ukrainians would be forced to surrender. Furthermore, during this video, we can see how exactly the clashes and fighting was taking place for the territory. We can see Russian soldiers, we can see aviation strikes, we can see FPV drone attacks, and of course, in the final part of this video, we can see several episodes how Russians were raising their Russian flag through the settlement, from the southeastern part towards the northwestern part. So when talking about this video, there were 4 episodes when Russians were raising their flag. The first one took place in the southeastern part, 2 more flags were raised in the central part, and one of the flags was raised in the most northwestern part on the territory of these probably facilities of this farm. So based on this video and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map. Once again, this is the situation by the end of the 23rd of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 24th of November. But this is not the only update about the Huliaipole direction. According to different pro-Russian reliable sources, first sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to enter the settlement of Huliaipole, and currently there are lots of Russian soldiers, already lots of soldiers in the northeastern and in the eastern part of the city of Huliaipole. So summarizing everything that was provided today by different pro-Russian sources, everything along this red line is already either under complete control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation or in the gray zone. So most likely tomorrow we're gonna start adjusting the map on the territory of the city of Huliaipole itself. So according to several pro-Russian sources, this area is already the territory covered with the fog of war, which means that Ukrainians, under the pressure of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, were forced to fall back from the northeastern part, from the northeastern side of the river of Gaichul towards the southwestern part. So most likely Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this territory in coming days, and the battle for Huliaipole can be finished much faster and much earlier than anybody can expect. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, Ukrainian sources began publishing videos about the situation in the city of Huliaipole itself. Here we can see how two vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine were moving through the city of Huliaipole, and how Ukrainians were filming the situation on the ground. As you can see, most of the buildings on the territory of the city of Huliaipole have been already destroyed as a result of Russian attack. Furthermore, during this video, we can see lots of destroyed vehicles abandoned by the armored forces of Ukraine. So it's already a ghost town, and most likely Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this area very, very soon. Furthermore, the Russians stated that their armies are moving further in the western direction towards the settlement of Dobropolye. This is another village that could be captured by the armored forces of the Russian Federation in coming days. The road R85 is already under complete fire control from the Russian side. The situation in this area is a disaster for the armored forces of Ukraine, most likely without any chance to restore the situation in Ukrainian favor. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting videos from this area and different statements. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes, the Russians secured two micro-districts. The micro-districts, the Shakhtarsky micro-district and the Gornyak micro-district. So both micro-districts are located in the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and from this area we received two videos. So this is the first video published from the central citadel. Here we can see a central hospital of the city of Pokrovsk, and we can see a Russian soldier that raised a sign of this unit that was probably responsible for this direction. So this flag was raised exactly at this point. The second video was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, or by a very reliable Russian source, and here we can see that's the clashes and the battle for the territory of the Shakhtarsky micro-district. So this is the video, most likely was published due to Russian report about complete control over the territory. So as you can see, both flags in both territories are located in the southern part of the city. And you know that since the beginning of the battle of the city of Pokrovsk, we received lots of videos from the south and from the central and from the northern parts. But when talking about the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, basically by the end of the 24th of November of 2025, the Russians, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, confirmed that just the territory of the city of Pokrovsk to the south of this red line was secured and cleared. So, which means that currently there are three layers of the city of Pokrovsk. The most southern part, so everything to the south of this red line, is under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Then everything between this red line and this black line is the territory which is probably 80 or 70% under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And the Russians are finishing the clearing of these territories. And everything to the north of this, let's say, black line, most likely is a gray zone, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians are located, and where both the Russians and the Ukrainians are fighting for every single square kilometer. So most likely this is the picture. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that several days ago, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation stated that up to 75% of the city of Pokrovsk were taken by Russians. Right after this statement, Ukrainians launched counter-offensive and most likely managed to restore control over some blocks in the northern part of the city. But for Ukrainian counterattacks, the Ukrainian authorities, military authorities, pay significant price. During the previous 24 hours, this video was published from the intersection of the Olympiyska Street and TO 515 road. Here we can see another cemetery of the Western equipment. Lots of vehicles, infantry fighting carriers, tanks were destroyed during the battle for the city of Pokrovsk, and all these vehicles most likely were playing something like logistical role for the contingent on the territory of Mirnograd, and as you can see, dozens of vehicles were destroyed. This cemetery was recorded exactly at this point. So this is once again the price that the Ukrainians are paying to hold the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Mirnograd for so long. As for the city of Mirnograd, during the previous 24 hours, we received updates about additional changes on the most eastern part of the city, and that Russians managed to improve their positions in the most southern part of the settlement. It seems that in coming days, the Russians will finish the battle for the southern part of the city of Mirnograd, and also Russians published this video. So as you can see, the Russians still continue suggesting Ukrainians to surrender. Several days ago, maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, Russians published almost the same video, but and then, if you remember, the Russians were also suggesting Ukrainians to surrender by sending these lists, by dropping these lists on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. So now the Russians came back to this practice, the Russians suggesting Ukrainians to surrender from the southern citadel of the city of Mirnograd. So it means that most likely, if Ukrainians reject this proposal, the Russians will intensify their offensive with the purpose to establish complete control over the southern part of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. We are talking about the territory to the south of this black line. So Russians will try to secure this area in coming days, and then Russians and Ukrainians will answer the most interesting and decisive part of the battle for the agglomeration. A bit further to the north, the Russians improved their positions on the territory of the city of Rodinska. This video was published today by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers in this area. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the southern part of the settlement of Rodinska, that Russians, by the end of the 24th of November of 2025, have established control for more than probably 60% of the city, and that Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, the city of Rodinska is not the only area where the Russians continue advancing. During the previous 24 hours, several changes were recorded in the area of the settlement of Zatishek. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were bombing Russians at this point. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians began restoring positions they lost during the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation that took place between August and November of 2025. And the most important is that Russians, according to different neutral mappers, managed to finish the battle for the settlement of Shakhova. This is a very important, let's say, progress advance on the ground, because the settlement of Shakhova was located along the main supply lines that go from, let's say, the city of Donetsk further in the northwestern direction and in the northern direction, deep inside of the Donetsk region, towards the settlements of Zolotoy Kolodец and so on. And if this information is correct, if Russians indeed manage to restore control or to capture the settlement of Shakhova, then most likely in coming days they may try to intensify their offensive operations. Of course, after they finish regrouping, after they finish securing the situation, Russians will continue offensive towards the settlements of Toretska, Sofievka, Kucherev Yar and Novoshachova. So, and this is already not the Pokrovsk offensive. This is probably not even the Dobropolye direction. It seems that this offensive operation that might take place here is a part of offensive operation towards the cities of Drushkovka and Kramatorsk from behind. Now let's talk about the Siversk-Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, also lots of very interesting changes were recorded. First of all, I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes, the units of the Group of Forces South managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Pazyona. This morning, several neutral mappers clarified the situation by coloring additional territories on the territory of the village of Vasyukovka. It seems that the Russians are tasked to finish the battle for this pocket between the settlements of Zeleznyanska, MO3 Road, and the settlement of Pazyona. The Russians most likely are tasked to maintain the lines to shorten the distances and then to advance further in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Alexandrovka, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the main supply lines for Ukrainian contingent, which is located in the area of the city of Siversk. Another important update is coming from the settlement of Zvanovka. I would like to remind you that several days ago, 2 days ago, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the settlement of Zvanovka was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But the problem is, and the thing is, that we received lots of geolocations and videos with the Russian flag just from the northern part of the settlement. We didn't have proofs that Russians captured the settlement completely. And today, on the 24th of November of 2025, several pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see how Russians raised flags through the settlement of Zvanovka. Lots of flags were raised, especially, and the most interesting is that the flags were raised also in the most western part of the city. So now we have no doubts that the settlement of Zvanovka was completely secured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation and that Ukrainians were forced to fall back. Furthermore, we start receiving reports that the Russians began another offensive operation, and this time between the settlements of Huliaipole and Liman towards the river of Seversky Donets. It seems that Russians currently are tasked to improve their positions along this red line and to capture settlements of Dibrova and Ozerное. This can allow the Russians to get the positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Kryvo Luka and Zakitna. Then Russians may try to cross the river of Seversky Donets and to establish a foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river behind the city of Siversk. And this is another position that can lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense and logistic in the area of the city of Siversk. So now it seems that the battle for the city of Siversk is also entering its final and decisive part, and something tells me that the battle for Siversk will be finished within the next 1 or 2 months. As for the northern directions, during the previous 24 hours nothing special was recorded. Probably the most important videos are coming from the settlement of Volcha. Here we can see how Russians were bombing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine across the settlement of Volcha. This is the next stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine. Russians are tasked to finish the battle for this territory. If they do this, they will answer the Kharkiv operational space and they will begin the Bely-Kolodys offensive operation. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.